Hi everyone, and welcome to the Rural Water webinar. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Adrian Smyth. I'm a development officer who takes care of biodiversity for group water schemes. The title of my talk today will be about how enhancing biodiversity can provide a source protection benefit. So some of the things I'll be discussing today will be types of biodiversity measures which are available, which can help in source protection, how biodiversity measures are important for source protection, types of biodiversity measures used to protect sources, some mapping that can be carried out that will help with biodiversity but also help in source protection, examples of biodiversity enhancement on schemes, and advice, support and resources available to group water schemes. So I suppose what kind of measures can our group water scheme implement? And I suppose we've kind of broken it down into two categories. So I suppose schemes should consider small measures first, and these measures are widely linked to source protection. They may not have a tangible benefit or direct benefit to your source, but they will benefit the wider catchment and therefore your source indirectly. So some small measures that can be implemented would involve, say, managing your lawn areas through pollinator-friendly grass cutting, restricting the use of herbicides, and taking care when completing capital works to prevent habitat damage. So I suppose all of these measures are, as I say, widely linked, and I suppose, you know, they should not just take place on a group scheme site. We would love them to be taking place throughout the catchment through initiatives and awareness initiatives. So I suppose some more pointed measures, some further measures directly linked to source protection include the planting of woodland as buffer strips. So we have our schemes such as Woodlands for Water, planting hedgerows along group scheme access drives, reservoirs, along watercourses, which I suppose will help to slow the flow of contamination and will also provide security and privacy, I suppose, for group scheme sites, but will also help biodiversity. And I suppose working with other organisations such as rivers trusts, woodlands trusts, to protect your source and support biodiversity. So I suppose, how is biodiversity linked to source protection? And I suppose biodiversity is something that has gained an awful lot of traction in recent years. I suppose there's a growing recognition that, you know, biodiversity isn't separate from the rest of the catchment. It's very, very much integrated. And I suppose, you know, it is intrinsically linked to the health of our ecosystems. And really a healthy catchment means a healthy water body. And I suppose the thing to remember is that everything has a very, very much of a knock-on effect. So by spraying herbicide in your catchment, you will be indirectly affecting your watercourse, but you will be directly affecting biodiversity in that area. So implementation of a quality assurance system, including your quality assurance checks, including source protection, will improve biodiversity and your quality assurance implementation. So in relation to the source catchment, we've created what's known as the Biodiversity Source Protection Pyramid. And these are the objectives that are directly linked to source protection, but provide a biodiversity benefit as well. So we have slow the flow, uptake of nutrients, minimizing your sediment loss, and providing alternatives to the use of pesticides. And I suppose the aim of this pyramid is to avoid some kind of hard engineering solutions, which were often the basis for source protection. And I suppose it's important to be conscious that some hard engineering solutions are bad from a biodiversity perspective, and they also require additional work to stay in line with legislation. There's an awful lot of maintenance associated with them. And we're talking about using kind of low-tech solutions, not end-of-pipe solutions, and not these hard engineering solutions. And these measures, like on the pyramid across here, have a positive impact on biodiversity and really can be the first barrier in source protection. So in the next few slides, I'm going to be going through the source protection pyramid. So the first of these is slowing the flow. So slowing the flow means interrupting or slowing down the flow of contamination off fields, roads, etc. into watercourses during or after a rainfall event. The planting of hedgerows involves a certain amount of mounding, which holds runoff and contamination. So think about species like blackthorn, whitethorn, pussy willow, rowan, and crabapple. The planting of woodland is also an excellent initiative, as trees will take up large quantities of moisture, resulting in increased soil capacity, and will help to slow the flow through mounding and barrier creation. So think about a mixture of kind of native Irish trees in this instance. Grass buffers and wildflower strips often merge into one. If you have a grass buffer, denutrifying the area, so taking off the grass, will allow natural wildflowers to come through. It will also allow wild grasses to grow. So grass buffers provide an excellent habitat and food source for pollinators. But remember, I suppose, the cutting and the removal of the crop to denutrify the zone is also an excellent way of managing the area in a biodiversity friendly manner, as you need to remove that material, once, twice a year to allow pollinators to thrive in that area. So nutrient uptake. So we have three kind of main topics here. So you have your vegetative buffer strips, your hedgerows, and your constructed wetlands. So vegetative buffers are buffers which catch contamination like bacteria, nutrients, and pesticides. They're very effective alongside watercourses and also provide your excellent habitat for pollinators and other species. I suppose, remember, to be effective, the buffer strips have to be managed, they have to be mowed, the material has to be removed. But as I say, that will promote the area as a good habitat. Hedgerows will also take up nutrients and provide an excellent stock-proof barrier once they're mature. And nutrients caught by the hedgerows will be used when the plants are reproducing and flowering, which provides a greater food source for the birds and the bees. I suppose the constructing of a wetland is an expensive capital project, but in some areas it's a very, very good solution. For example, the Anne Valley project in Waterford, it's called the Dunhill Wetlands, has demonstrated that the wetland system can be used to remove a huge amount of nutrients and sediments from farmyard runoff in advance of discharge to the environment. They also have the advantage of becoming excellent habitats and can be a public amenity area. Constructed wetlands do require a certain amount of maintenance, but in areas where there is a huge nutrient load or a huge sediment load, they can be an effective solution, while also providing a very good habitat for your local biodiversity. Minimizing your sediment loss. So sediment can have a detrimental impact on surface waters, but can also impact your groundwater indirectly through areas of high vulnerability, etc. So sediment contains many contaminants. So it can contain phosphate, bacteria, and can contain herbicides and heavy metals. And suppose, look, no landowner wants to see their soil being washed away in a storm event. And although maybe only a small amount of sediment may be removed each time, it does have a detrimental impact on both soil health, farm finances, and your water quality. The installation of a natural prevention method, such as your hedgerows, your strips, your trees, can help slow or stop the sediment entering the watercourse or area of high vulnerability. And look, that's a very good way of stopping your sediment from entering your watercourse, but there needs to be kind of a wider discussion, I suppose, on what kind of practices within the farm can prevent flow, sediment going into kind of around watercourses. So I suppose, access by livestock to watercourses is also a primary cause of sediment loss. So we'll say in the picture behind you here, we can see that there's a good fence put up, and there's also, a vegetative buffer in behind that. And I suppose, the use of this kind of measure is excellent because it will prevent your sediment entering your watercourse, but it's also a very much of a biodiversity friendly measure. And I suppose, there are other measures that can be put in here as well. So say the planting of willow alongside the watercourse would help to stabilize the bank and would help slow the flow as well. So look, all of these measures are very much linked. Providing an alternative to pesticides. So in order to ask people to change their practices, there really needs to be a viable alternative to herbicide put in place. And there will always be a need for plant protecting products, but I suppose the use of these needs to be more targeted by all elements of society. Whether you're a householder, whether you're a farmer, whether you're a group water scheme operator, there needs to be, I suppose, more care taken. Herbicides and pesticides pose a risk to drinking water, but also have a detrimental impact on biodiversity. And this is how biodiversity is being used as a vehicle to protect your water source. Because something that's bad for biodiversity, it's going to be bad for your water source. So the Shanuden Group Water Scheme Source Protection Project are identifying different methods of control and performing trials on your usual control methods, so your physical control, but also using kind of semi-natural methods such as, say, using vinegar and Epsom salts. Many schemes have already stopped using the use of sprays around the distribution mains, and all schemes have stopped using herbicide around their sources many years ago. But we would ask that kind of schemes who are continuing to spray around their distribution networks to either, I suppose, reduce the use of these sprays and to keep informed on our website as to how these trials are operating. The Roscommon project is slightly different, and I suppose there's been a county-wide campaign to reduce the use of pesticides in the catchment. So the project is called I've Planted a Tree and I've Gone Pesticide Free. It's a really, really good program, and we would love for that kind of a program to expand into other counties and other regions. So invasive species are a thing that really have become more prevalent in recent times, and they've got an awful lot more media attention. So when completing a measure for source protection, group schemes need to be conscious that an infestation does not occur in their buffer zone, in their wildflower strip, and just to be conscious of it. So Japanese knotweed, for instance, is an invasive species that causes damage to both local biodiversity, but it can also cause bank destabilization, which is exactly the opposite of what we're trying to do with a biodiversity measure. And I suppose we would be encouraging schemes who are looking about putting in a biodiversity measure to keep a check on the strips, and maybe as part of your quality assurance system, to ensure that this kind of problem does not occur. So mapping, and I suppose the mapping on this slide here was carried out in Blackstair's Group Water Scheme in Wexford. It's a very, very interesting piece of mapping, and I would have taken in the scheme's original zone of contribution report, but it would have overlaid it onto other mapping structures such as your special area conservation. And I suppose the area in purple is your zone of contribution report, and is overlaying, as I say, on your special area conservation. And this mapping system is very interesting as it allows you to identify the percentage of your catchment which is under agricultural land, which is under roadway, which is under domestic houses, which is under farmyards, and identify the risk associated to your source, from the activities that are in your catchment. It also allows you to kind of quantify how much of your catchment is dedicated to biodiversity or source protection, and where improvements can be made. So this can even be something so small as the amount of your catchment which is under hedgerow or under woodland, and what I suppose the group scheme can maybe look at promoting in their catchment to improve these areas. So some examples of your biodiversity enhancement. So to use an example for the Limerick Group Water Schemes, so the schemes in this area have begun to maintain the group scheme sites in pollinator-friendly condition. They've restricted the use of pesticides around their mains. Pollinator-friendly mowing is taking place on their sites. Planting of wildflower seeds and flowers are also taking place, and signage is also being erected. So I suppose if you are doing a measure, it's very important to put up your signage, because you're educating and you're promoting what you're doing in the wider catchments. So I'm just going to show you a very, very quick video of what has happened in Limerick, and just to give maybe some of you at home some ideas of what can be done. So you can see here some signage up on the gate, and you can see some of the areas that are being prepared to put in these measures. So some of the preparation and also some of the results here just allow the scheme to be, I suppose, it's far more aesthetically pleasing, but you can also see that they reduce the use of herbicides. There's a good amount of wildflowers coming through, which is excellent from your pollinator side of things, but also it's reinforcing the practice that the scheme is having on not using herbicides. Another example is Tydabna Group Water Scheme in County Monaghan. So they have done very similar work to the Limerick Group Water Schemes in the fact that they're maintaining their sites in pollinator-friendly conditions. They're planting their wildflower seeds, they're planting apple trees, they're erecting signage, but also I suppose they're liaising with external organizations such as Antashka, who are involved with managing the catchment around their lake source. And I suppose it's very important that your group scheme is liaising with different organizations and getting that knowledge and really working together to get a good result. As I say, when you're helping your biodiversity in your catchment, you're also helping to protect your water source. So we can see here in the first picture, the manager meeting Antashka. Some of the original sites that were being prepared to put in a biodiversity measure. You can see in some of the slides that there is a well in the middle of the site. And by planting these, you're also, I suppose, reinforcing the use, not using herbicide, but you're slowing any sediment flow that's coming off fields onto them sites as well. And of course, there will have to be management of these sites, like everything, but really they do have a huge impact, and I suppose a very good positive impact on both the source protection and biodiversity elements and what the scheme is doing. So this scheme has done a biodiversity measure in most of their sites, and it's really, really positive. They've also engaged with their members by sending out booklets, by sending out communications on how homeowners can improve biodiversity in their own areas and in the wider catchment. So some of the advice and support that's available. So we have begun a partnership with an organization called Trees on the Land. So their aim is to plant 1 million trees on one particular day, usually in February. So last year there was 9,000 trees distributed in County Tipperary, and I suppose we would love to see more local authorities, more schemes getting involved with this. So I suppose going back to the Roscommon project, which I've planted a tree and I'm going pesticide free. These are the kind of organizations that can really help us to meet these goals. Your local authority, the majority of local authorities have a heritage officer and some have biodiversity officers, and they're really, really good sources of information about your local area and can also help the scheme with, say, funding queries and things like that. Your agri-environmental schemes, I suppose we all know that there is a new, hopefully, agri-environmental scheme coming out either through the CAP or through other means to replace GLOS. So some of these schemes will have, a co-benefit to your source. So we'll say, for example, the low input permanent pasture in GLOS currently, promotes not using a huge amount of nutrients in your ground, which has a knock-on effect on your source. Your National Biodiversity Centre. So the National Biodiversity Centre were instrumental in setting up the original document, which was the pollinator-friendly management of group scheme sites. And guidance is being created specifically for group water schemes. And these are all available on our website, so we'll encourage you to pop over there and have a look at it. And there is high potential for awareness raising and biodiversity enhancement, such as what's happened in Roscommon. So some of the resources available, and these are all available on our website, as I say. So the biodiversity framework document was created back in February 2020, and it really outlines the aims of where the group scheme sector, or where I would hope the group scheme sector would go in the next couple of years up until 2024. Your guide on your pollinator-friendly management of group scheme sites is also up there. There's links to your relevant organizations, such as your National Biodiversity Centre. And I suppose we've also created links with different organizations, such as obviously the Biodiversity Centre, but say the likes of leader companies who are helping us with funding for training and such like. So some of the training, and I suppose we don't expect any group scheme to begin a measure without having some elements of training or some elements of knowing where they're going. So in relation to Roscommon, there was leader funding sought for biodiversity training. So it's due to begin in September 2020, and it's 100% funded for participation in group water schemes. The course concentrates on biodiversity enhancement on group scheme sites, so your sources, your reservoirs, treatment plants, and network sites. And the ecologists will be drafting plans and site maps of what measure each scheme can do in each place. And many of these measures are going to have a source protection benefit. So we would hope that once we see this is successful, that we can maybe look at rolling it out to other counties. So group schemes getting involved, I suppose I've been kind of blown away with the support that we've had from group schemes in this. So group schemes in every county are getting involved. Schemes have been encouraged to trial different measures and used to showcase how to improve biodiversity. So to go back to Stranooden, they have started a trial on different methods, and it's absolutely excellent to see. Training such as the course in Roscommon can be given in other counties. Support and guidance is, as I say, available for all group water schemes, and it's important to remember that no measure is too small. There's nothing too small, and you can all do something to improve biodiversity. So thank you for listening today, and if you want to get in touch, you can contact me via email or through the Q&A panel, and my email address is up there on the slide. So thanks very much.